areas are bad. Letting people in that smoke are usually bad. So if you have smokers in your company, don't let them in the door. Chances are they might not be an employee. We know about transit systems. We know that getting on transit systems with cell phones and checking your email or having a badge on your waist, all those types of things could lead to some kind of conversion attack against the place you're actually going to or leaving from. We know about social functions, going out, having too many drinks. You could end up in someone's hotel room and your badge could get cloned and you end up in the bathroom at 4 a.m. over a toilet while someone's breaking into your office. So social functions are bad. Happens all the time. Client-side attacks, we've seen road apples. We know about plugging things in because everyone disables USB, right? People have auto run turned off, all those types of things. We know about the client-side surveillance when you really want to step your game up, put cameras in place, monitor alarm pads, monitor what the activities are inside of a building before you want to go break into it. Those types of things are bad, right? So everyone's seen all these things over the years. Everyone's talked about them, beat them to death. Congratulations. Everyone in here is now a social engineer. Achievement unlocked. So let's step it up a little bit, right? Let's not talk about the things we've heard for the last 10 years in all the same talks. So, quick little trivia question. Who makes the best social engineers? Yes. Not my answer, but I love it. Second best answer. Who makes the best social engineers? Also a good answer. Not my slide. Kids. There you go. Kids. And I know this firsthand because I have a 3-year-old going on 13, and she owns me every day. So they get everything they want. So you learn these things at a young age, right? It's ingrained in your brain of how to get what you want, how to manipulate people, how to acquire things without paying for them. Kids. So we grew up, right? We got smarter. We started learning how to write tools. We started learning how to do our job better. We grew into these things, and frameworks and automation came out of that. The problem with frameworks and automation is instead of making it a supplement to what we do on a day-to-day basis, it really just made us lazier and we lost creativity. So the problem with that is when automation came out and computers were combined with automation, everyone behind a keyboard became a badass. Everyone started sending phishing attacks. Everyone started doing pretexting attacks. Everyone was bold and had courage behind a keyboard. But the downside of that was they didn't need to be technical. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge to get someone to give you things remotely because you're not standing in their face and trying to gain those pieces of information. So what do? We took it to the workplace. We took it into the office. We started showing all these automated type frameworks. We started showing how we could just mirror Gmail and we could use click jacking and nab jacking and browser pwning and client-side attacks and whatever else. And the workplace got confused. They're like, these things are so easy, what do we do? I feel bad because Gmail's been used in probably more demonstrations now with phishing than 08067's probably been used. So that's the new soup du jour. So you go into the workplace, you start doing all these demos, you show your boss how cool you are. Great, you're a rock star, right? The problem with that is back at the office, they're confused. They have no idea what the value is anymore. They're like, these things are so easy to do. What's the value in having any kind of SE attack done on our business? They start asking all these questions like, what's the point? What's the value? What do we get out of these things? Because obviously it's so easy for you to click 5 options in a menu, and now you have a successful phish or a successful SE attack. How do we stop these things? And they have no answers. In reality, they're not doing those kinds of demos in the real world. These things are actually happening in the wild, and the businesses don't relate the value of what you're trying to show them in your cool little demo or what they're reading online to what's really happening. These guys probably aren't using automation. They're probably not mirroring Gmail. So you can't really read the numbers there, but just in Q2 or Q1 of 2013, 46,000 unique phishing attacks. So there's stats to justify the value of why these things should be tested. It's not just, hey, here's a cool little demo with set or some phish me service or whatever it might be. These things are real attacks. They're going after brand damaging type things. They're hijacking brands. They're stealing data. It's not how quick can we get a password and move on. One thing to point out, the US, 64% is where phishing attacks source from and they're targeted. The next one below that is Germany at 4%. So it's happening right here in our own backyard. It's not some mythical vaporware buzzword. This stuff is happening. So when you educate your business, start talking about what the value is, there's real stats to show the value of why you should do these things, and it's happening day to day. So how do we fix it? We have to recalibrate the business, right? We have to start asking questions like, okay, well, if you don't think you need to do phishing, you don't need to think you do need social engineering tests, Why do you have antivirus on your machine? You know you're going to get a virus one day. What's the point in putting AV on your machine? What's the point in having HIPS products? What's the point in having all these layers in front of it? What's the point in even testing those things? It's the same thing for SC, same thing for phishing, same thing for all those types of attacks. The only way to actually evaluate where you are in your posture and how strong things are in your organization is to patch it, test it, update it, test it again. And you do these things on different levels, whether it's electronic, social, physical, all these things have some kind of gap, has to have a solution, and you have to test it. So the only way to really test those things isn't tracking clicks, sending phishes, and see how many users click something. It's showing impact in those tests. What can you derive from this type of attack? What's the value of it? What do you get out of it? And that's all about showing the impact. So one way to show impact is stop doing the same things year over year. Don't repeat the same kind of test. Don't repeat the same kind of generic phish attack. Don't do the same kind of, I'm going to call the help desk 5 times and ask for a password. Did you pass this year? Great, move on. Change it up each year, become more dynamic, hire people with more skills, whatever the solution may be. So the problem is, in today's industry, there's not a lot of talent behind most of these attacks that businesses are faced with. There's some canned template, they're sending some kind of LinkedIn invite, Facebook invite, whatever it might be, and it's generic, cookie cutter, vanilla type stuff. There's no impact behind it. There's no value to what you're trying to show other than you're clicking, tracking clicks in your environment. So traditional phishing is pretty much done with the whole free candy. Can I give you a piece of candy? Can you give me your password? There's no layers to it, no depth. So the way it's usually done is the client will give you a list of email addresses. You put those through your little automation tool, your mirrored site, however you set it up, right? You send it out. Hopefully it works. You cross your fingers. If it does work, you collect clicks. You have clicks that you're tracking. You have shells maybe you're tracking. Maybe you're acquiring passwords. You put a report together and you're done. There's no value in tracking those things because what you're really looking for is what happened after those things occurred. If someone did click, what's the impact after the click? Not, here's my clicks, here's your report. So some of the misconceptions that the businesses have is, like we were saying before, well, we're going to get owned with a click, why even test it? What's the point in putting some kind of user-based test where we send something out to a subset of our population and we track the clicks, we know what's going to happen, what's the value? The value is showing the impact, not showing the clicks, not showing the metrics. So the businesses is confused. They see all these traditional attacks going on. They have no idea how to go about getting the information they need and finding the value in those pieces because of the way traditional tests have been done over the years. They're just confused. So it's time to step it up, right? Let's take up SE to another level and do tests the right way. Whether it's phishing, pretexting, impersonation, on-site, whatever it might be. Step those things up from traditional type versions that's been happening for years. How it should be done, didn't really show up too well. Neverland Ranch, great demonstration of how social engineering and baiting and tracking along the way to get to the final result, right? There's all sorts of little, tricks and techniques throughout Neverland Ranch that demonstrate value and depth of testing, not, tracking entrance at the front gate, right? But how it should really be done is something we've been preaching for a while now, is testing multiple components of social engineering, right? When you send a phish, it's not just about testing if a user clicked the link. It's testing all the layers within there, right? Is perimeter controls working well to stop things like, generic phishing attacks, maybe things that look much more legitimate. They're going to get past with not generic spoofing and things like that, right? You've got registered servers, you've got legitimate mailers, you've got all these layers that make it legitimate to get through the front door. Once it's through the front door, how well are you testing the other layers inside? How well are you testing egress filtering? How well are you testing on-box controls and inline controls? How well are you testing the ability to exfil data over different communication channels, whether it's straight raw TCP, whether it's using more sophisticated type techniques, whatever it might be. So there's different components within a proper social engineering test that don't always get tested with these generic cookie cutter things because they're really only testing 1 or 2 pieces of that if they're lucky. In the most cases, they're probably just testing awareness and the training policy. So keep those things in mind when you're trying to build your attacks and you're trying to educate your business on the right way to do things, is see if it incorporates all those different pieces of the triangle, not just 1 or 2 components. So one of the things we talk about when we talk about how we structure our attacks and how we're going to build things that may spread out over a 2-3 week span, not just a 1-day attack, is what are we looking to gain from these types of attacks? Not only are we going to look at tracking the awareness level of the users currently, if they've done some kind of new program frequently and they think they're up to par now, do some kind of differential against the current program they put in place and the training they've had, and then go back and test again. See what the gap is with the current program. Are they educating the right things? On top of that, what are the security posture of the end user systems? It's not just about patching, it's not just about system hardening, it's the layers of controls on top of that, like HIPs and inline controls and things that should detect some of these generic attacks that come through the door, and even some of the sophisticated payloads. There should be on-box controls to at least detect some of those things, right? The technologies you have in front of the user workstations, whether it's content filters or proxy, how well are those things working to detect and respond and notify you in an ample amount of time so that you can get ahead of the curve and stop the things before lateral movement starts happening in your environment, before it's gone too far and you have no control over quarantining what just came in the door and mitigating some kind of sustainable program that, if it's detected in X amount of time, can I respond and quarantine it so it's in a small subset of my environment, not it's the sky is falling and everything's compromised. But one of the values of doing phishing the right way is being able to measure the incident response from the inside. And there's a couple ways to do it. We do it, obviously a couple different ways based on budget and scope and time. One would be maintaining some kind of active communication with your client. As a phish goes out, as some kind of SE attack takes place, red team engagement, whatever it might be, having the active communication the entire time with the end user gives you the ability to measure their response, how well they seed information out to their population, whether it's support staff, end users, whatever it might be. Maintaining communication the entire time through the attack is key, because you don't know how well things are working on the other side of the fence when you're just sitting there as an attacker. So if you maintain communication, gain some kind of information back from the client when you're doing these kinds of tests, you can get a better feel for how well defense is working, because by nature our industry is all about offense. It's all about attack. No one ever focuses on how well they do to defend some of these attacks, and could it have been better, could it have been worse. So the whole red versus blue teams are something that you guys should keep in mind when you're doing these kinds of attacks. How well is the blue team working to defend against our red team? And then the other things we talked about before, right? How well are they doing against exfil data? How well are they doing against identifying persistence in your environment? If you guys have went to Chris and Rob's talk yesterday, they showed a lot of cool things about doing persistence in your environment and putting controls in place to try and identify some of those things, whether it's commands being executed, whether it's movement around to certain key boxes in your environment. How well are you getting a handle on lateral movement and vertical movement in your environment to identify some of those things? And then the last piece, obviously, is the combination of testing both your technologies and your process. A lot of times, most conventional attacks only test the tech. They don't focus on the process. So all in all, that's how the value of phishing gets extracted when you move away from just doing the clicks and the metrics. So let's start talking about phishing for value and some examples of that. Anyone recognize that cheat code, by the way? Awesome. So when you're doing these things and you're looking to get value out of it, the first step in anything, right, is prep. If you don't do your homework, it's going to suck. You're going to spend all this time building something, you're going to shoot it out the door, and it's going to fail because you didn't do your homework. So like anything, OSINT's always the key to anything you're going to do in an attack, right? The more time you spend on OSINT, the more you know about your environment. Maybe you send some kind of bogus attack first to see how they respond. The more you can gather about the environment ahead of time and be prepared for their response, the better you're going to be. If you're lucky enough to find information about their infrastructure before you even attack them, then you have a quick and easy path to what you want to go after once you do get inside. So OSINT's key there. Another key piece that people don't always focus on is what's going on with the business currently when I'm doing my OSINT collection, right? Are they doing some kind of new marketing campaign? Have they just had some new acquisition or joint venture, or they're about to launch a new product? The more you can learn about that organization during OSINT, the better your phish may be, or the better your attack may be, because you've got something that's current in time. It's not a generic vanilla type of attack, and you're basing it on things that they've seen that's been trusted information passed to them from executives, marketing, whatever it might be. So domain name selection is key when you're looking at those things, because you may not be looking to spoof their, or buy a domain name that's similar to their corporate website. Maybe it's a new product they're going to release. And you've got a lot more options when you're looking at domain names around a product versus trying to find a domain name that looks like Google. So domain name selection is key when you're looking at what they're doing currently and what kind of attack you're going to frame. The other thing that's key is when you register the website. A lot of times people will try and do obfuscation with phishing. They'll try and hide it, tiny URL or whatever method they want to use, instead of actually going and buying a legit domain name, registering it, setting up the right records, setting up the right PTRs, making it completely legit attack so that if someone does investigate it or they have technologies in place to look at that site ahead of time, you have all those things lined up before you even send the attack. Another key piece when you're going to be sending phishing is registering the mailer. We've ran into environments where their SMTP gateway will look and see where the emails are coming from. And if you don't have a proper MX record set up, a lot of times they'll stop it right at the front door and the phish isn't going to make it to the end user because your MX records aren't set up properly. So setting your mailers up, setting your web servers up, building all those things ahead of time is going to make you much more successful when you get to the point of launching the attack. One thing that we hear a lot when we're talking to people about how they do their types of attacks is whether they do validation before they even send the attack. There's a lot of ways out there to validate email targets before you even send to them to see if they're a good address, a bad address, or through OSINT maybe you found it and it looks like it's a new hire but now they've moved to a new company, whatever it might be, right? So validating targets ahead of time so you're not sending a phish out to 100 people and 40 of them are going to bounce. That's going to be a red flag if someone's looking at their mail gateway and see 40 invalid addresses that just got attacked in the last 5 minutes. So if you validate your email targets ahead of time, chances of you not being detected when the phish goes out is going to be dramatically different than sending to a bunch of bogus addresses that are no longer with the company. But also validate your targets from a role that they have within the organization. The last thing you want to do is send your phish to one of the incident response guys, right? It's going to blow your wad immediately. It's going to get shut down. So validate who you're going to be targeting. Goes back again to OSINT, right? And then the last piece, obviously, is test your payload. Can't tell you how many times we've shot ourselves in the foot because we go through all this build out, this customization, we find some new attack of the day that we want to use, and we think we vetted it out well enough and we didn't test it on 64-bit or 3 different versions of a browser. So there's times where you run into an environment that they only allow certain browser versions in their environment, and if anything else is trying to connect through a proxy, they're going to stop it because they know they only have IE8 in their environment. So testing all your payloads with different versions of architecture, OS, browser, third-party application, make sure you do your testing. The last thing you want to do is spend days building your attack, and then you get screwed because you didn't test it on the right platforms. So one of the things that we've been doing for a while that we've never really seen anybody talk about, other than, hey, we have a proxy-aware payload that's clean, is we run into a lot of high-profile environments that have proxies in place to do content filtering and categorization. If we run into an environment that we know that has a blue coat, we've done OSINT on the outside, we've seen information about blue coat support, help desk tickets, whatever they've submitted, right? Or we've been able to see they have a blue coat through some of our pen testing or whatever we might have done. We know they have a blue coat. So one thing that we usually do when we buy a site, we've gone through our OSINT, we know what kind of attack we're going to build, we go and set the site up. First thing we do, set up a CNAME for the site. Don't put an A record out there, set up a CNAME. Now I've bought Laras.com, and there's another company out there that does something that we do, which I don't think there is. So we set up this website, we set up a CNAME, and we point it to the legit site. Then we go register it with all these different proxies. And a lot of them have URLs that anyone can go to and submit their site. So you submit your site, you wait for their bot to go scrape it and inspect it, and it's really redirecting them to the legit site. And they go, oh, that's something that looks like eBay. It's now business economy, computer, internet shopping, whatever. And they categorize it for you. Then your company pulls down the latest files, they index it, they say, oh, this is a new site that's in Blue Coat's latest index file, and they categorize it for you, and now you have a site that when you do send a phish, it's going to be categorized and not be classified as unsafe, insecure, whatever, right? Cool stuff? We've seen it take a couple of hours, and we've seen a couple take a few days. Usually hours to days. It's not a lot. Most of the time it's pretty quick. When we're doing phishing usually, we'll usually build everything, or we'll buy the domain names, register it, get it all prepped, let it set for a few days while we're still trying to build our attacks, and then when we're ready to attack, go change an A record and we're ready to go. So one of the other things that's important when we're looking at doing our attacks, and it's not just a one-shot 4-hour phish, we're talking about attacking them for a week, right, is having the right architecture. This is key, especially when you start getting into the point of incident response, looking at your sites. Maybe they're doing things internally, and they find your payload, they reverse it, they see where it's calling out to, they start blocking IPs. So a couple things that you can do to get you more time during the test, right, is have some kind of redundant architecture. Have new binaries that call out to different IPs that are clean that you haven't used yet. Have sites that you can fail over to if you want to send a cleanup email later, whatever it might be. Build out an architecture that supports the duration of your test, not we got stopped today, now we got to spend another 2 days building something new, registering sites, setting them new IPs, whatever it might be. But also from a redundancy standpoint, make sure that if you need to roll an IP during a test, you've got those things available. You've got things tested, all your tools are up to date, the box is hardened, it's ready to go. You've got your post-exploit tools on it. You've got an architecture that's ready to support what you're going to do in the event that someone does detect you and they want to shut down your first attempt. Having the architecture and the redundancy is key. And then last, one of the things that we've learned over the years, right, is test the day of the attack. You'll spend all this time prepping sites, prepping binaries, getting your payloads ready. You set it up. You go to bed that night, you get ready, and you're like, next morning, we're going to launch this thing, we're getting in. Next morning, you fire it out, something's not right. You go look, something changed in Metasploit, SVN pull the night before, something's broken, now HTTPS is broken, somebody pushed something new out, whatever it was, right? So test the morning of the attack is key, the night of the attack, whatever it may be. Don't let it ride for a day, you come back to it and say, all right, I've done all this work, I'm ready. So do your testing immediately before you launch. And even during your launch, once it's out in the wild, go test it again. Make sure that your cloud box didn't have a hiccup and all of a sudden web services aren't working to it anymore. Test it throughout your engagement. Make sure the binary is still working. Make sure your cred theft is still working. Stay on top of your attack. Don't just let it sit idle and wonder where my shells are. So we talked about this before. You know, everyone's all about collecting metrics, right? Let's track our clicks. Users love to click. Let's see how many clicks we got out of the X number of people we targeted. So there's a couple different ways to track clicks. One of the easiest ways that we do it is have a session ID variable that's pretty much just a base 64 encoding of the email address that we sent to. So I think if you decode that, it's my email address. But put that within the URL of the Phish. And what's cool about that is you can set up your mailer to randomly set a new session ID for each one of those URLs you send out. But in the old days of doing phishing, you could obfuscate, you know, bad site behind google.com. And a lot of email clients wouldn't say this is a different URL behind the hyperlink that you're trying to put into the body, right? When you add variables onto the end of the Phish URL that you're trying to send, and you've got your string that you can decode later and track clicks the right way, these don't show up as an obfuscated URL in mail clients. So that's beneficial because you're not changing the domain name, you're not changing the initial path of a URL, all you're doing is adding a variable to the end. So it doesn't show up as some kind of modified link when the client receives it. Meanwhile, they're just clicking on the first part of the link. They have no idea there's a session ID tracked within there. So then you start parsing your web logs at the end. You can see that out of 100 people, we had 40 clicks, and here's my users that clicked. So you can tie it back to the user and the time you sent. So that's the right way to track results, not I had 75 hits in my Apache log. Who clicked it? I'm not sure. So it's not just about metrics, right? It's about showing impact. How do you show impact? You find out what makes the business money and you go after it. It's about getting the money, right? The metrics are just a piece of your report that's an intro, where you have your GUI, your graph, your funny little dashboards for your customers. Here's all your pretty reds and greens. Here's your metrics. Cool, we got that out of the way. Here's how we show impact. Here's our post-exploit. Here's what we gained access to after you clicked the link, after your 43 out of 100 did what they did. And then the last piece of it, right, is you have to prep for your attack. The businesses are prepping, they're patching, they know what's coming. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But you also prep yourself. You get a good night's sleep. Maybe you work out in the morning. Maybe you're ready, you're jazzed, you're ready to go attack. Maybe you get doped up on a good breakfast and a lot of sugar. Maybe you like to snort pixie sticks during your attack. Whatever it might be, right? So you've done all this prep, you're ready to attack, right? So let's talk about phishing techniques. Or what we like to refer to as masturbating. It's bad. Another Chris slide. Thanks, Chris. So we have a couple different techniques that we use a lot. Obviously, the context of the technique is different, but the technique is the same, right? So the first one is what we like to refer to as live bait phishing, or going out and collecting your bait that you need for something else. So in this kind of attack, we're not looking at doing a full stage blended type of attack where we're doing, looking for creds and doing client-side attack, and maybe we're dropping binaries and we're doing all this sophistication, right? Maybe we know that during our OSINT and maybe during our external PIN, if we've done that too, we found that they had a single-factor VPN. We know they have OWA outside. So maybe in this attack, we only want to get credentials, because if we get one valid pass, that's going to lead to maybe VPN access, maybe SharePoint, maybe Citrix, whatever they might have that's single factor. So in this kind of attack, we're just going after creds. There's a lot of different ways to do cred theft. Everyone's seen the demos. But one of the things that we like to go after is OWA, because OWA is a great place to find information. Not only does it have everyone's email and what people like to email around, which they email everything because it's protected inside OWA, they also have great links to external things, but they also have the ability for you to monitor response when you do attack. And maybe that's the first piece you need during your 2-week engagement that you're going to be attacking them, is have some kind of visibility inside to see what the response is when you start attacking. Maybe you send one attack, see how they respond, and you stage your next attack off that response. Or maybe you bait them with one attack, keep them busy, and monitor response while you send a second one. So a lot of different cool value pieces that you can get from just gaining access to OWA with one account. So you build your attack, you find your single factor VPN and OWA, webmail, whatever they use, right? You send out your attack, and then you gain access to OWA. I've shown this in previous slides, and I believe Gates has shown it too. Gates found this during a test. In the old days of OWA, you could go download the address book. You had direct access to it, you could pull it down. Now you have much more email addresses than you had before. You have contact information, you have phone numbers, you have all these good pieces of information to do additional attacks or follow-ups or brute force or whatever. So Gates actually looked at 2010 and was like, there's got to be a way to dump all the users in OWA without actually having access to the global address list. So we looked at the request that happens when you start searching for people. We found out that there was a variable you could modify to change the number of results that's shown on each request. And within that, there's a variable, or there's a piece of information that's stored in one of the fields that has email address. So quick little script in burp, run it, dump everyone that's in OWA. Now I have more usernames, now I have more email addresses, I have new people to attack that didn't get the first one. I have more information about the company that I had before with one valid account. But I also have that valid account to go log into VPN. What's great about VPNs? They bypass all the expensive shit you put in your environment. Usually people get on VPN, they don't have to deal with NAC. Usually they don't have IPS on the VPN. Usually there's no protected tunnels between each user. So if you're on the VPN, you could attack another VPN user. They don't have isolated tunnels. So lots of cool things that we find when we can actually get VPN access, because visibility on VPN is far worse than visibility on the perimeter. So they trust that someone's on the VPN with a valid password. They're a trusted user. Let's let them do their work. So that's kind of the first series of attack of getting creds, getting in with VPN, dumping users, getting more email addresses, getting more usernames, finding out the roles of people in the company, and all you're doing is going after credentials. There's no AV flagging for client-side attacks. There's no payloads that are going to trigger anything. It's a legitimate-looking email that you've done all your homework on first, and then you've gotten credentials, and now you're in. Everyone's seen cred theft, right? So a new way to apply creds. Second one we like to do is phish in the middle. And this one's pretty cool because you start out with an initial phish or an initial attack, and you gain access to maybe OWA, right? You're in OWA, you start looking at active conversations for the user that you've brooded, you've gotten in with some valid account, right? So you're in OWA, you find an active thread that has some kind of file attachment going back and forth between Lucy and Sally. Lucy and Sally like to send statistics on a spreadsheet, and they're working on some kind of metric-based whatever program. So you have access to Lucy's account right now. You download the spreadsheet they're actively sending back and forth, and you bug it. And then as Lucy, you send a new one to Lucy. What's Lucy do? She looks at the spreadsheet and she trusts the conversation thread that she's already in with Sally, and she opens the spreadsheet. It's not a phish. You're not spoofing anything. It's kind of a phish. But you're using legitimate access and an active thread to implant something in the conversation. Typical SC type of technique, right? But the best part about that is you're already beyond the perimeter. So you don't have to worry about getting around their proxy, getting around their anti-spoofing technologies, getting around some kind of IR response. You're already in the system, and you're already in an active thread. So you bug the conversation, you get direct interaction with the target as another user. Maybe they sit next to each other in a cubicle. Hopefully they don't. We've had that situation where they are right next to each other, but you don't know physical location sometimes. So you have all this visibility, all this direct interaction, right? So we had this client, found an active conversation, found a spreadsheet that they were sending back and forth, downloaded a spreadsheet, put our little voodoo on it, put a macro in there, had a payload, sent it back to her. Can't really read it too well, but it says, I'm having a problem opening this file. Can you try to open it on your computer? Of course. They hang out and talk and go to lunch together, and who knows what they do after work. So she tries to open the file. Unfortunately, it doesn't open on her computer. But luckily, you have direct access to her as this trusted user. And you got to go, all right, well, shit. Now I have a thread with her that I can't just shut down and say, all right, don't worry about it. Because she's going to go find her in the bathroom and go, hey, what's up with that spreadsheet you sent me? So you go into developer mode right in the middle of an attack, right? And you call upon the people that are the right ones to put in the process. That being Gates, because Gates is a badass at coding shit on the fly, and Dave as well. Dave had some cool stuff that we shared in this attack. So Chris and Dave work together. They talk about what's going on, and we finally figure out it's an issue with 64-bit and the macro that we're trying to use, and the version of Outlook or Excel that we're trying to use. So going into this troubleshooting phase. Meanwhile, I'm still got her on the line. And so I'm having to stretch this attack out while we debug and do development on the fly while I have a valid attack on the line. So I'm keeping interaction with her, whatever. We're keeping it, somewhat quiet so red flags don't go off. So Gates and Dave work back and forth for, 8 minutes? It was something quick. It felt like longer, but it was short. And you want to tell this real quick? You tell it better. Yeah. So they figured out that it was an issue with one Metasploit. Here, no, come up. I'm just giving you time to walk. So you got short legs. So.
I'm used to it. It's been that way my whole life. So what we did is Dave wrote unicorn.py. Everybody seen that? It auto generates the PowerShell payload for you. Check that out. So all the PowerShell voodoo of making the payload and giving it the string, so you can just paste it in. So it took the Excel macro. The giant ass string that Unicorn spits out was too big of a macro for, or too big of a variable for Office. So I had to break that thing up into a few pieces and put it in a hidden tab, and then the macro just puts that back together and just calls the PowerShell string.
So macro with PowerShell.
Pretty neat.
Which doesn't work in Metasploit. Yeah, so we tested it. Go back again to test all platforms, all versions. Learn that one. And we got it working on 64-bit. We sent her another email. We said, hey, we got it fixed. Can you run this again? Can you try it out? Hey, it opens this macro warning. They're like, fucking awesome. Just go ahead and click that shit. I got it on my machine too. So she clicks it and we're like, all right, cool, all good. Delete all deleted items and sent items and everything else in OWA. And hopefully she did the same on her end, but she did not. But we never got caught. So nice little fish in the middle attack, right? We get active access, we have visibility, we can troubleshoot on the fly, and we're able to modify the payload that isn't the same when you're attacking from the outside because you don't have the visibility on the inside, right? You don't know what they're running, you don't know what they're seeing, you don't know how they're interacting with it, you don't know if there's problems, you don't know if a flag has gone off. So the whole time we have access to her inbox, we know if she's forwarded it on to somebody, we know if she's going, hey, this doesn't seem right, or hey, I just saw Sally in the hallway and she told me that she didn't send me shit. So we have this visibility, we know where the attack is at any given time versus Phish on the outside with no creds, you're pissing in the wind hoping it works, right? Valuable? Cool little demo? Cool. So then we have a technique called side channels. So maybe you've had active conversation with someone electronically, you've talked to them over email, maybe you've interacted with them like we've done previously, and things are starting to get a little tricky for you. You don't know exactly what's going on. So you say, all right, screw it, I'm gonna go from email to phone. And you go into a pretext conversation with them. Move it to a new channel of conversation, move it to a channel where it's not gonna be as easily detectable, and you start to have interaction with them over the phone. A lot of times talking to somebody on the phone, they're gonna go, I was just talking to this guy on email and he called me. An attacker's not gonna do that. Yes, they are. So you take it to a pretext attack and you move it to a new level of conversation, and now you maintain an interaction over the phone, and you can, again, do your troubleshooting on the fly, change payloads on the fly, direct them somewhere else because you have them on the phone. So combining phishing and pretexting and using them at the right time gives you much more value than just sending a phish and hope it works. So one of our favorites is what we like to call Chum and Clean. So the idea behind Chum and Clean is you build your first attack. It's legitimate. Maybe it's not so legitimate, however you want it to look, right? So you build this attack, and you send it out to a mass amount of people, and it's going to get caught because it's a loud, noisy attack. Someone's going to report the shit. Or maybe you go really bold and you send it to somebody on the IR team because you want to start consuming resources.
Or you get a shell.
Or you get a shell. So you send this first attack out. It creates all this noise. The sky is falling. They're running around. Oh my God, we're under attack. How many boxes have been compromised? They go on a wild goose chase and start doing their own homework and trying to research a payload that doesn't go anywhere, whatever you set it up as, right? So you've done all these things to create chatter in the environment and consume resources. So IR is off doing their thing. They're out of your way for a minute, right? Well, then you wait because maybe you have access to someone's machine or you have OWA with a cred or whatever, right? You wait for the response to come out. Now you have their actual response. So, like, all right, we have the response. We know what their plan is. We know what they've instructed their users to do. What do we do next? Well, we see their response. We see what they were told to do. We see that they were never supposed to give their password to anybody and never supposed to click a link that's not company.com. And they've been instructed on all these things to do, and they're freaking out because all of a sudden they feel like they've screwed the whole company and they got to follow direction to the T. So you get the response, and you're like, all right, it's time to bring in the cleaner. So you call upon the cleaner because the wolf gets shit done. Oh, you called the wolf? That's all you had to say. So you bring in the cleaner. And the cleaner basically says, I don't even know what this one is. It was one of the ones we used. It was like earlier you were faced with a large-scale attack, right? And the email told you to do this and this, but you shouldn't have clicked the link. And we base it off the last response we saw from them that was legitimate, so we tweak it, and we say, it was an attack against Java or Adobe or whatever. Go update your shit right now. But it's not Adobe. It's not Java. So you call upon the cleaner, and the cleaner gets you back in because maybe you got blocked off the last one you did to all new IPs, all new payloads, all new bin drops, and you've used information that you've gleaned from their response to come back in as a credible incident response help desk email, whatever it was, and you get them on the second hook. This doesn't always make clients happy because they feel, yes, because they feel that they paid for a phishing attack and it was one attack. They're like, you have paid for a block of time. You didn't tell me how many times I could attack during that block of time. At Friday, we're done. It's only Wednesday. Well, how many more are you going to send? I don't know. Let's see what the response is. So there may be multiple iterations of the cleaner, but at some point you get what you need and you get persistent access, and you've gained plenty of access internally that you don't need to go back and phish them again or get on the phone and talk to them via a pretext, right? Cool little technique. So you've done all these things, and now you've got heat on your ass, right? Instant response is engaged. They're calling everybody. Shit's going down. So how do you deal with the fire and deal with the heat? So one of the things that we like to do when we're dealing with instant response is block them. Don't let them come check out your site. You know that they have managed services through SecureWorks, or they have a DR facility and a team with SunGuard that uses boxes there. Or maybe, like we see on pretty much every test, they like to go inspect your site from a VM on a Comcast or a DSL connection or whatever, right? Block all that IP space. Or if you want to be really asshole, do it like Gates does and send them off to their legitimate site. So then they go on a goose chase of, fuck, someone's phishing us from our legitimate site, and there's got to be a payload on here somewhere. And so IR, again, is consumed with going and looking at shit that you've redirected them off to. So all these different ways to consume resources, right? But on top of that, monitor that shit on the fly. You're going to see new connections coming into your web logs. As soon as you see that shit, block it. Or you already have a shell, put up a different payload and send them on a goose chase because they don't know that the jar was replaced, and now they're looking at a new IP and blocking that IP, and they forgot about the first one, right? So there's a lot of different ways to keep them busy and keep them, you know, active through this. Or if you want to get really bold and you know all the IP space the client comes from, and you know maybe the proxy they come out of, just whitelist the proxy. The only problem with that sometimes is you're going to have remote users at home. They're going to log in over, you know, some VPN connection or whatever it may be. Or if you get lucky enough, they log in right from their home connection, and you wait for them to get on the VPN. So whitelisting, blacklisting, a lot of different ways to prepare for instant response. But there's also the times where you don't have active communications with your client, and they're going to contact the ISP that your shit is sitting on. Be prepared to lose access to your box. We've had that happen a couple times, where they've contacted our cloud provider, and cloud providers aren't always cool with everything we do, which is why we have multiple cloud providers. And be prepared sometimes that they may shut your shit down. So if they do, have redundancy. Have another site you can roll to, change an A record, have screen running, God forbid you lose access, you can get back in. Don't lose your terminal access that you have. But also have a redundant architecture that you can roll new IPs, you can roll new bins, whatever it may be, to keep your attack live. Don't just have one fixed box and maybe a secondary, and if they block the entire IP space that both those boxes are on, now you're going to set up a whole new attack, you're going to lose time, and possibly you're going to lose complete access because they're going to find all your shit. So having, you know, some kind of readiness for the ISP response is great. Also be ready for authorities, which is another key. So we had two clients that we didn't maintain active comms with them because they wanted pure black box, zero knowledge, attack us when you want to. And the only problem with that is they went full Monty on us and decided to report the IPs, report the sites, and contact authorities. And we got wind of the contact authorities part about 5 minutes before they were coming to my door. So luckily we got that shut down. But, you know, be prepared for that, right? Have layers to your architecture so that if they have to go hunt and inspect, you have some time to maintain a little communication with your client to stop the cops from kicking your door in. So having all that ready, right? But then you also have legal counsel. I don't know if you can read this one very well. We've had a couple interactions with legal because they didn't like the domains that we went and purchased and we were using to attack certain companies or other companies. One of them was a variant of FedEx delivery status. Apparently it's a violation to have a company name in the domain because that's their intellectual property. Apparently. Didn't know that wasn't cool. And FedEx sent us a nice little letter threatening for us to give a domain up. That was a fun one. Or my favorite recently, this was what, a month ago? I decided that it'd be cool to send people flowers and fruit because everyone does that around holidays. And we went out and bought edible arrangements, but with an I. They wanted to give away mints. It's not just about fruits and chocolates. So we bought edible arranged mints. And it fucking worked. So we buy this domain, right? And we set up the CNAME. It's fucking cleared through every proxy on the planet. It's categorized. It's ready to fucking go. We have all this shit cleared, ready to go. And to set the CNAME up, at the time, Edible Arrangements had an issue where it wasn't CNAMing properly because it was going to an IP and there was a vhost with some hosting company and the vhost wasn't showing content because CNAMEs don't like vhosts, they like IPs. So I redirected them to like 1-800-Flowers. The problem with that was Edible Arrangements thought some 1-800-Flowers was trying to steal their business and start selling mints. So we realized there's a new service offering for brand defamation by buying domain names and bugging them with some other domain. And they look at it and go, oh my God, fucking eBay is trying to compete with Amazon and, you know, whatever, right? So it created all this fucking chatter internal, and legal was pissed. We still haven't given them the domain yet. It's mine. So and we told them that if they ever start selling mints and not fruits, that we have to get a kickback because we created the fucking idea, right? So I want some proceeds, and then I'll give you your domain. Right. So you've done all this cool shit, right? But sometime your fucking mojo on your attack just works way too well. And you got to deal with the repercussions of that. One of them being, we decided to send an advisory out to a New York-based company about bed bugs. Because when we sent this thing, whatever year it was, they had a bad bed bug problem. Anybody live in New York knows about the bed bugs? It's fucking bad, right? So we sent out this advisory to our client as this NYC notify, whatever, right? And we're like, in the areas around your office, there's bed bug issues. And that was like all the areas around their office. Well, what happened was somebody inside forwarded it to the CDC. And it had payloads. And we had shells. So we had shells to the client, not the 3-letter thing. So we sessioned, kill, whatever, high-fived and fucking moved on. Or did we? So dealing with out-of-scope shells, right? It's difficult because we're ethical and we have to draw the line. Hardest part of our job. Don't steal the money. Don't steal the money. Or you decide to attack another New York-based company and you decide you're going to offer refunds now because the fucking subway never offers refunds. But now they're going to. And that shit gets forwarded out to all sorts of people, right? And you get shells from large New York-based banks. Maybe. So deal with these things when your shit's just too hot and people love to forward it and click it and you get stuff, right? You got to draw the line. So so you got some next level shit, right? And you've demonstrated impact, right? Because if anybody's persistent and knows impact is, right? Right? He's fucking converging like a boss, right? So, how do you really show convergence and impact, right? You come in and you smoke it. You fucking steal all the shit you got to steal. You show impact, all from these different kinds of attacks that we've talked about, right? And that's the key to any of this, right? It's not about the clicks. It's not about the metrics. It's not about the stats. It's about what makes the business tick and how can I acquire it and how can I show impact. That's where the value is for any of this testing. So how do you really show impact? It's not just about the 4 things we talked about in social, right? If anybody saw Chris's talk previously, he talked a lot about convergence and red team. And this is just one component to red team testing. Whether it's phishing, pretexting, baiting, on-site impersonation, tailgating, that's just social. Combine those things with physical or electronic and you create touch points. Where's the overlap between physical and social? Where's the overlap between all 3? And the only way to properly test those is do red team testing, not do the silo-based, I'm going to do an electronic test this week, I'm going to do a Phish next week, and eventually someone will figure out the value of when those things are combined, what's my overlap and what's my risk if someone decides to go 2 phases or 3 phases of the triad. So that's the takeaway from all this, right? Is it's one component of red team testing, it's one component of convergence, but when you bring those things together, how do they combine into I've gone social, I've gone electronic, and now I have full access to your facility? So that's the takeaway from all this, right? Is how do they blend together and how you extrapolate value from doing those types of components. And that's it. So any questions? Got a couple minutes.